to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rogers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rogers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Walks it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, hang on. I'm experiencing bear with me. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. Welcome in to Gamecock Pod Live for August the 6th, 2025, episode number 1820. And we have a great show in store for you today. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Alex Jones from thebigspur.com, and then later we welcome back our good friend Lulu Kesin from the Greenville News and the USA Today Network. We'll be talking Gamecock football and women's basketball on today's shows. First, let's get to our Nana's Porch news notes and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it is a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a watch party, which will be coming up soon, a rehearsal dinner, a celebration of any kind, Little League, birthday, anniversary, whatever. My good friend Chris Payne has got you covered. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com, nanasporch.com. Get in touch with him. Tell him the Cockfather sent you. You can also support Nana's Porch, which is a Gamecock-owned and operated business, by ordering plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. All you do is go to the homepage, look in the top right-hand portion, click on pimento cheese, and you are just a few clicks away from the best damn pimento cheese on the planet. Affordably priced. Shipping is free of charge. Checkout is simple, safe, and secure. The toughest part of the process is deciding how many containers of smoky jalapeno and how many containers of the great regular flavor am I going to order. So order your Nana's Porch pimento cheese today. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, to the news. The Gamecocks ranked number 13 in the USA Today coaches poll, coming off a 9-3 regular season, which saw the Gamecocks rattle off 6 consecutive wins, including wins over number 10 Texas A&M, Missouri at Vanderbilt, who had beaten Alabama, and of course at Clemson to end the regular season. Quickly, Texas number 1, don't know how I feel about that. Ohio State number 2, Penn State 3, Georgia 4, Notre Dame 5, Clemson at 6. That's the first opponent on the Gamecocks schedule. 7 is Oregon, Alabama 8, LSU 9. Of course, the Gamecocks host Alabama for homecoming, and after hopefully getting off to a 5-0 start, they will get an open date before traveling to Baton Rouge to take on Garrett Nussmeier, Brian Kelly, and LSU. Number 10, Miami with Coach Mario Chokeable. Number 11, Arizona State. Number 12, Illinois, the team that beat South Carolina in the bowl game. And then the Gamecocks are 13. Other SEC teams include Ole Miss at 15, Florida at 17, Tennessee at 18, Texas A&M at 21. Congratulations to Asia Wilson, Asia Wilson, who highlights this year's South Carolina Letterman's Hall of Fame. She highlights 6 new inductees. Her accolades are too much. It'll take 15 minutes to rattle them off. But among the others, track and field athlete Natasha Hastings, a 10-time All-American sprinter and 3-time NCAA champion, including a sweep of the indoor and outdoor in the 400 meters. Natasha Hastings, Brandon Hulko, a diver from 1999 to 2002, a 3-time All-American in 2000, 2001, and 2002. Paul Jubb from men's tennis, 2016 to 2020. He was the 2019 NCAA men's singles national champion, the first in program history. Akram Mahmoud in swimming, another 10-time All-American and a multiple-time Olympian. Goalkeeper Molly Patton from women's soccer, 2006 to 2010, an All-American. She ranks number 1 in program history with 15 shutouts in a single season, 3rd in career shutouts, and 2nd in career goals against. Her opponents averaged 0.73 goals per game over the course of her career. And so congratulations to all 6 of these inductees into the South Carolina Letterman's Hall of Fame. Also, shout out to Aaliyah Boston. To hear the national media talk about it, when Caitlin Clark doesn't play, Indiana has no chance, except Aaliyah Boston named the WNBA's Eastern Conference Player of the Week. Indiana, going into yesterday's action, was on a 5-game win streak without Caitlin Clark. Boston averaging 16.7 points per game and 11.7 rebounds per game as the Eastern Conference Player of the Year. Yesterday, the SEC announced South Carolina women's basketball's SEC schedule dates. 4 marquee games. We'll get into those with Lulu Kesin, including a Saturday game on February the 14th at LSU. Folks, we can only imagine just how hideous Kim Mulkey's outfit will be. And Alex, I don't really think there's going to be a whole lot of love lost in that game either, but we're not here to talk women's basketball with you, but you have to admit, Kim Mulkey, she never ceases to amaze with the level of hideousness in which she can descend in her sideline outfits.
Yeah, first of all, good morning. It's good to be back with you. But that's always one of the more interesting things when you watch the LSU women's basketball games and see what the fit's going to be.
No doubt about it. Well, good morning to you. I hope you're staying hydrated. I know you guys have been out there from preseason practice. So right off the bat, two announcements are imminent for recruiting. So let's start there. We know for certain on Friday at 3 o'clock, four-star running back, I know not by your network, Amari Thomas, he will make his public declaration. He had been committed to Florida State since January, decommitted the same day prior to Landon Duckworth's commitment to South Carolina. Phil Kornblut interviewed him. He says he's 6'1", 195. He says he has made his decision, but has not notified the coaches. He will have hats on the table, not going into games and all that stuff. I'm just going to pick. He rushed for a combined 2,545 yards and 56 touchdowns the last two seasons, and he thinks he is a premier running back. Alex, we're a little over 48 hours away from that decision. How are you feeling about the Gamecocks' chances with Amari Thomas?
Yeah, feeling pretty good about their chances. This is one where, South Carolina's kind of been surging in this recruitment for a little while now. He's been committed to Florida State, and South Carolina had that, kind of their first official visit with him and kind of the first key official visit with him. And, coming out of that visit, you kind of felt really good about where South Carolina stood with him. But you still, with him being, in Bluntstown High School, which is just outside Tallahassee, and him still having that final, Florida State official visit, you still had to wonder, if South Carolina could keep the momentum they had in this one going into that last official visit. And obviously they did. And, I think, one of the things that was, most interesting in this recruitment is, just a few weeks after his official visit to South Carolina, he went to a Florida State 7-on-7 camp and showed up to that 7-on-7 camp with Carolina gloves on. So I think that was a pretty, good sign for South Carolina right there. And then not long after his Florida State official visit and kind of into the summer, obviously he announced his decommitment, and South Carolina's been in a pretty good spot there. And that hasn't stopped other schools from really trying to get into it too. Clemson also, I think, has battled for this one. Colorado has also offered since his decommitment. But, as you mentioned, with about 48 hours or so heading into the announcement, I feel pretty good about Carolina's chances here.
All right, and then we don't know exactly when, but it appears that Cross tight end Caden Ramsey is close to making his decision. South Carolina, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech as a junior. 40 receptions, 749 yards, and 9 touchdowns, rushed for 5 touchdowns, 6'5", 205. Also played defense, and where are those stats? He had some 54 tackles, 13 interceptions in 14 games playing safety. That's unbelievable. He's a big wide receiver, but it looks like, his high school coach, from speaking with Sean Elliott, they see him growing into a flex tight end, kind of like a Joshua Simon type of role. And he can really run. He's a legit 6'5", and we know once he gets into that strength and nutrition program, he's going to be a minimum of 240. What are your thoughts on Caden Ramsey? And I got to say, that just sounds like an NFL tight end's name. I mean, there have been countless South Carolina small town guys. Courtney Brown, that certainly sounded like an NFL defensive end. He went to Macedonia High School with Joe Hamilton and was the #1 pick in the NFL draft. Luther Broughton from Cainhoy went to Furman, played a long time in the NFL. I mean, I could go on and on. But Caden Ramsey, this is a guy Sean Elliott zeroed in on. How are you feeling about the Gamecocks' chances with him, and what kind of player, do you see when you see the film or see him in camp?
Yeah, really intriguing guy. Like, I remember first seeing him when I went to the state championship game, the single A state championship game between Abbeville and Cross, and I was there to see DeMarcus Leach, obviously, but then you see Caden Ramsey playing, and you're just like, yeah, man, at that size, he's what stands out. And you really, you kind of see what they're seeing from a, maybe like a Josh Simon type of role, being with a 6'5", 203 pounds. And obviously, once he gets into college, assuming he does indeed pick South Carolina, which feel good about South Carolina's chances there. But, you've seen these guys, these freshman tight ends. You look at Mike Tyler, a guy that needed to gain some weight when he got into the program. He's done that. He's getting up there. Same thing for Michael Smith. Once these guys get into that college nutrition program, especially in this tight end room, like they've gotten them where they need to be pretty quickly on. So, really an intriguing guy. And you kind of mentioned those defensive stats and the 13 interceptions. I think kind of just shows that has a nose for the ball. At that level, playing at safety, obviously you still got to play both ways. And, that's something that you kind of like what you see, something that he can track the ball. And obviously another little bit of that's just he's a playmaker. So I think that's something that's really intriguing. And you can see kind of that flex tight end role and, at that 6'5" range, maybe you see him kind of lining up in the slot potentially in those red zone type of situations. It's a really intriguing option. South Carolina kind of has identified him for a long time now, and now in the summer quickly moved on him and feel good about where they're at with him.
Yes, I want to talk about just Tristan Lewis for a second. Okay, so obviously, I had Hale on last week. He knocked it out of the park. He was not as high on Tristan Lewis's athletic numbers. I guess he didn't run as good as he's run in the past at Carolina's camp, 4.6, 3 in the 40, 4.5 in the shuttle. But I think it was you maybe who interviewed the high school coach, said he had a laser time, 4.5 time in the 40 from a camp. But here's the key stat, okay? Bruce Feldman's freaks list, okay? The #1 guy, the big-time wide receiver at Ohio State, who I think is the top player. Mm-hmm. Ohio State with him and Caleb Downs, they clearly have the top 2 players in the country. This guy's 6'3.5", 220 pounds. He has a 38-inch vertical and an 11-foot standing broad jump. Okay, well, guess who else also has an 11-foot standing broad jump? Tristan Lewis. And my friend Brad Lawing told me that guys that had 11-foot standing broad jumps and then the vertical leap, that really measured the explosiveness more than a 40 time, because sometimes guys just don't always run well. I think even Lewis had kind of, or maybe that was Ramsey, they tweaked the hamstring, but 11 foot is explosive. And my sources say this guy verticaled around 37, 38 inches in the testing portion at camp. And I just think that's another guy, because he's a high school quarterback. He's going to play safety, but another big time sneaky athlete that's been added to this class.
Yeah, and to your point on the vertical and broad jump and that test and explosion, like that's something that, when you look at high school guys, that's something that you like to see when they can put those numbers up, just because, once you can get them into a college weight and strength and nutrition program and all that, those numbers are probably going to improve just because they're going to get bigger, faster, stronger. And, the 40 is, one thing like, you always, that is something that you look for, but that's also, again, something that can improve once they get into, college weight programs. So, I think it's something that we know, especially that safety spot and kind of any defensive back spot, especially under Torian Gray. Like, there's certain things you can look for from guys can sometimes play faster than they run a 40, or if that makes sense. Like they can, just look like they play game fast. And, I think that's something that you see interest in Lewis, like just an athlete, like not only, what he can do on the football field, but you like what he can do on baseball field. And there's stuff on a baseball field that can translate in a game. It's something that, for instance, like an outfielder tracking, if a guy hits a fly ball, they have to track the ball just like they have to do in college at safety spot or a wide receiver or whatever. But, with Tristan Lewis, I think he's really intriguing just because of just some of that size he can bring. And, just something that, that 6'3.5", 200, like that fits kind of what they look for in those safety spots. And obviously not going to compare him to Nick Emmanwori right now, but that's something that you see some of the similarities to just with what he does in high school there. And, I just something that, if Torian Gray, likes a defensive back and there's stuff that there's traits and things that he looks for, I think you have to like the pickup for South Carolina.
No doubt. All right, so let's jump into the 2025 Gamecocks. I know you guys went to Shane Beamer's press conference after that. I don't know, Birdies with Beamer was on that Monday, but afterwards, players, assistant coaches were available to the media. You've been out at practice. Tell me maybe some of the guys, let's go just with offense first. Maybe some of the guys that physically are standing out to you, like, wow, that guy, like Mike Tyler, he was 225, now he's 250. Nick Harbor is 245 now, that we saw the before and after pictures of him after a full off season in the weight program. 5% body fat. The guy looks like a bodybuilder. But other than those, maybe some of the guys offensively and defensively that just have really caught your eye, and it's just kind of a wow factor.
Yeah, we'll start up front on the offensive line. I think one is Nick Sharp, and I think he's one that's really stood out from his size and the physicality he brings. And, obviously he missed some time in the spring with an injury, but, I think as a guy that has a chance, in this first scrimmage and kind of owning the preseason camp, has a chance to earn a starting spot. And there's a lot of competition there. But from a physicality standpoint, he's somebody that really stands out and brings a lot of size coming in, transferring from Wake Forest. I think I could almost throw all the running backs into this. Like, I think they look pretty good. Like, it's obvious, the whole team had another really strong summer in the weight room with Luke Day and his staff. Faison, he looks the part physically. He just looks like, what an SEC running back should look like. And then again, I think, Jawarn Howell and Matthew Fuller have also taken that, kind of year one to year two jump in the program from a physicality standpoint as well. I'll throw one freshman in there, Donovan Murphy, like obviously kind of the first time, seeing him, obviously seeing him in high school and all that, but in the South Carolina uniform at practice. And, from a physicality standpoint, he looks like he's, stepping right in where those guys picked up as well. And, kind of just an interesting little fact on him, talking to Mike Furry at the Birdies with Beamer thing, he was asked, is Donovan Murphy a little bit behind coming in just because he was a summer enrollee, and he said, he's not behind at all, just because he was able to be around the program a lot, just from a spring practice standpoint, being that he's at Irmo. From a defensive standpoint, I think the first one that stands out is Judge Collier. Like, from a physical standpoint, like, he looks like he could almost be a linebacker or a defensive end with the way he looks. Like, wow. That secondary is going to have a lot of, size. And, Brandon Cisse is another one that I think has had a really good summer in the weight room from where he arrived. But Judge Collier is really one that stands out. I think maybe the biggest one would be Fred Johnson. Like, he is pretty clear he's taken that year one to year two jump from a physicality standpoint. That's not too surprising, being that he's going to be, relied on this defense, and a guy that I think last year probably, obviously this kind of an obvious statement, but would have played a lot more if you didn't have those older veteran linebackers in there. But I think just from a physicality standpoint, he looks like an SEC linebacker now, and you can also throw Justin Okoronkwo and Sean Murphy in there as well.
Good stuff. So, I've heard some whispers. There's been a lot of talk about some certain guys. So, but before we jump into that, because I've kind of broke it down into offense and defense, you mentioned Rasul Faison, NCAA. What the hell's going on here? I mean, what is up? Why can't you make a decision? Okay, we are 25 days away from kickoff, Alex. I know the last time we had you on, we discussed, the closer this thing gets to when you start prepping for Virginia Tech, Faison's reps are going to start going down, or he's going to the scout team at some point.
Yeah, I think I was sitting here looking at the calendar to see when they could start timing this up. But, right now, being that they're so early in preseason camp, they're still kind of, focusing on themselves and all that. But, you get into, next week and then really the week after that, after they get past that first scrimmage, like, you got to wonder if they don't have an answer yet, what's going to happen from a rep standpoint. Like, they got to, obviously, they talk about there's always open competition in that room, but you got to start wondering if they don't have an answer, like how those reps going to be divided up, because you got the closer you get to August 31st, the more you want to have, your first guys going all together to kind of build that chemistry together. So that's something that, they want an answer, a month ago from the NCAA, but, you have to think like by next week they need to have an answer just so they can start really putting that game plan together, because they're going to probably start game planning for Virginia Tech probably 2 weeks or so, week and a half or so out, and start get that extra game plan in. They're going to want to have a solid answer there, and just still on the NCAA's timing, and I think it's coming to the point where we'll just find out when we find out.
All right, no doubt. So some offensive players I've heard some whispers about. I don't really think it's a shock or a surprise, although he was still kind of wearing the shoulder harness yesterday. I've heard just great things about Michael Smith. I mean, look, I've said it ever since I saw this guy's junior film when he committed to the Gamecocks prior to his senior year. I mean, 6'6", 250, essentially. He is a wide receiver playing tight end. He's worked on his blocking. Sean Elliott's called him his everything tight end. I just think, I'll just quote Michael Jordan, the ceiling is the roof. Let's throw that out. But I'll just say, I think the sky is the limit for this guy, because I think next year he'll be in Bruce Feldman's freaks list, because you just don't see a guy 6'6", 250, maybe even more than that now, that can run, can jump, and high point the ball. And I think he will easily slide, provided he stays healthy, slide into that Joshua Simon role as the go-to tight end and as a favorite target for LaNorris Sellers.
Yeah, and I think you have to imagine that the tight ends are going to be used prominently again in this offense. I think, if there's a guy that's going to be if I had to choose as a breakout candidate for the South Carolina offense, I think, Michael Smith's going to be a guy that's at the top of that list. And just for all the things that you mentioned, a guy that's, I think if you look at his size and didn't know anything else about him at 6'6", 248, you could, all right, maybe he's that kind of guy they bring in for, blocking and things like that. But the guy moves like he's 6'6", 215 pounds. Like he moved, like you mentioned, moves like a wide receiver. Like he had a kind of a quietly good, solid freshman season too. Had to battle a little bit of injuries there late, but you mentioned it. Like his high school film was really good coming out of Savannah, and South kind of got in on him early. And he's just a guy that obviously missed some of the spring. I think he would have liked to him be in for that spring practice just because it could build on that year 1 to year 2 jump. But at the same time, with how much he played last year and being in the system with Dow Loggins and Mike Shula, I don't think you're worried too much about that. And I think you're going to see him pick up right where he left off. But just from that tight end room perspective, I think you're going to see a lot of, you can potentially see a lot of the 2 tight end sets. So I think you're going to see obviously you're going to see a lot of Michael Smith this year. But if I had to choose a breakout candidate for that offensive room, I'd probably he would be one that's at the top of the list.
No doubt. I mean, he did miss spring, which I think we all would have preferred that, but I think that just gave Jordan Dingle and Brady Hunt and even Maurice Brown, who, my God, he's now 6'4", 255. He's a guy that is another dude that looks like a bodybuilder. You saw the before and after shots of him. I think he's at like 5 or 6% body fat. I'm with you. I think South Carolina's tight end room is in great shape for the present and the future. So at wide receiver, I think all the returning guys have made a jump, but a guy that I've really been hearing whispers about is Vandrevis Jacobs. I mean, nobody's doubted the athleticism, the speed, but now the maturity, I think, being on campus for a year, going through a winter workout, a spring practice, working with Mike Furry for a year now, I really think it's going to be a battle, and I think he's going to be right in the mix, him or Jared Brown potentially to be in that starting lineup, but a guy that I hear good things about. What about you? And then who are maybe some of the other wide receivers you're hearing about?
Yeah, with Jacobs, I think it's now, I think you're hearing some just how more consistent he's being. And, Mike Ferry kind of mentioned that, at the Birdies with Beamer interview, he's, talking about the maturity and think he's grown up a lot. And he, showed flashes last year when he was in the game. You think back to the Old Dominion game, he was right there making plays and kind of battled some injuries and things like that throughout that season. But, I think he's, when you talk about the wide receiver room at the whole of the offseason, I think he may have gotten overshadowed a little bit just by those other returning guys and the freshmen. But I think he's one that, you're going to see him potentially make an impact this year. I think he's gotten off to a really good start in preseason camp. And you also throw Mazio Bennett in there. I think he's also taken that year 1, year 2 jump. And I think he was another one that, battled injuries a little bit there on, but was pretty solid. I think, finished second in terms from a wide receiver standpoint in yards and catches. So a guy that, has a lot of talent and, looking forward to see what he can do. And then obviously, everybody wants to hear about, the improvements that Nick Harbor's made. And I think, just having that spring where it was a sole focus on football is going to help him. And, really kind of interested to see, what the talk is about that room as a whole from a freshman and returner standpoint coming out of this first scrimmage this Saturday.
No doubt. All right, so let's move to the offensive line. So obviously, we've heard a lot of good things from everybody on Trevon Ball. That really is not a shocker to me. Marquis Anderson, I think, so last week, full disclosure, Hale and I both have picked Tree Babalade to be the starting right tackle because he's not going to be the starting left tackle because he's behind a future probably top 10 NFL pick, provided he stays healthy, and Josiah Thompson, who's now over the 300-pound mark legitimately. He started the Missouri game. He was critical. Look, I'm not throwing shade on Casey Henry, but athletically, he got overwhelmed at times. Tree Babalade is a guy, I think it's his time. And I just think with Nick Sharp and Marquis Anderson, Trevon Ball, and others, you got plenty of candidates at guard. And you got to get your best 5 on the field. And I think Tree Babalade's, according to Tony Morrell, that left guard experiment kind of didn't go as good as they had hoped. And so I think he's the second best tackle on the team, which means he needs to start at right tackle. What do you think?
Yeah, I've kind of been saying it for a while with Tree. It almost feels like he's going to be too good to keep off the field, but you also only have 5 spots on the offensive line from a starting spot. And really, for Tree, you only have, I guess, 3 spots because you feel really good about Boaz Stanley playing center. And then, as you mentioned, Josiah Thompson at left tackle. I'm interested to see how that offensive line forms. I think, the offensive line we've heard a lot about, really the most about from, summer workouts into preseason is Trovon Ball. And so in the work he's put in, you saw it his freshman year, the talent's there, his freshman All-American by some outlets. So, I think you like his chances of potentially land that right guard spot. But, Nick Sharp's another one to keep an eye on at that guard spots. And you also mentioned Marquis Anderson as well. So they have a lot of depth to go through at those spots. And I think one thing you're liking is that center spot with Boaz Stanley seems to be pretty closely locked down. That's obviously one of the most important spots on the team just because of the things that centers have to do. And he's an experienced guy at Troy, was really good at Troy last year. And, obviously getting to talk to him yesterday, he's, obviously you hear the maturity and, the kind of the leadership role and chemistry that he's helping form in that room. But, back to Tree, I think it could just be a case where he's too good to keep off the field and they got to find a spot for him.
No doubt. All right, so switching to defense. Defensive end, I think everybody's waiting on Desmond Umeozulu to make that jump. We'll see if he does it, but opposite of Dylan Stewart, the names I keep hearing, obviously Brian Thomas Jr., that's Clayton White's guy. There's no doubt about it. He was productive. He's bigger. He's a senior. I think he's going to start regardless, but the guy I keep hearing about is JT Gear. It's his senior year, 6'6", 250, transfer from Syracuse where he was very productive. He's not been able to stay healthy the last 2 years, but he has been healthy in the offseason and so far in camp. What are you hearing on him? And I'm just going to throw in Anthony Addison because I think that guy could be too good to keep off the field, even if it's as a designated pass rusher, and the same maybe even for George Wilson.
Yeah, that's kind of the intriguing part of this room. Dylan Stewart's the known commodity at that one spot, but, who's going to be his backup? Who's going to start at that other spot? Who's going to be that person's backup? They have a lot of different options I think are, really talented options to go to. And, you mentioned Brian Thomas. He's one that, again, I think I've said it a lot of times. He had a really good season last year, just kind of got overshadowed a little bit by what Kennard and Stewart were able to do. But guy that came in there and got, I think, 6.5 tackles lost and 4.5 sacks. So I think the biggest thing for him is just continue to, improve from a run stopping standpoint. I think you can see what he can do from a pass rush standpoint. That's kind of the next step for him. He's kind of talked about that in the offseason as well. And you mentioned, Anthony Addison. That's one that I was going to throw in there as a guy to kind of maybe like a wild card to watch in this room because those freshmen, those upperclassmen, when I talked to them at media day, there were a few of them that mentioned Anthony Addison's a guy to keep an eye on. And I think a lot of things you hear about him, and this is coming from, Shane Beamer and Sterling Lucas, it's kind of the motor that he plays with. It's an all-out 110% effort on every play. And, I remember Shane Beamer in the spring mentioned, that Anthony Addison was causing some problems for the offense, just what he was able to do at defensive end. So I think it's for him just continue to get bigger and stronger, but, could potentially be a guy to, get some reps this season. And then you mentioned JT Gear. I think the biggest thing with him is just being healthy and staying healthy. He's, that's kind of been a struggle at South Carolina so far is battle on injuries. But, you saw it at Syracuse. He put up good numbers at Syracuse the year before he transferred to South Carolina. And he kind of brings that size to that room, kind of the same you see from a Kyle Kennard standpoint as well. And guy, I think, actually started the first 2 games last year before Dylan Stewart ended up starting. So the talent's there, and I think you really like what you see from a depth standpoint in that room. You mentioned George Wilson as well. Could he be a guy that when South Carolina puts offense into a obvious pass down situation, do they bring a George Wilson in there because he's the pass rushing from him is definitely there.
All right, so what did you think when Travian Robertson said Christian Ingram's playing this year? Certainly when you saw the picture of him in the uniform, 6'6", 310, I'm hearing whispers. People are in that building are comparing this guy to Javon Kinlaw. That's pretty high praise. Kinlaw was a couple years older. He had gone to junior college. But from a size standpoint, once Kinlaw lost the weight, you kind of see a similar guy. And let's face it, Southern Cal doesn't recruit a D tackle from Georgia, and neither does Michigan. Kentucky would. But South Carolina beat some powerhouse programs for him. He did not have the benefit of spring practice, but coming in the summer and now with everything added that coaches can do and the walkthroughs you can have in the summer and the individual instruction, it just sounds like he may be too good to keep off the field.
Yeah, whatever Christian Ingram can give them this year, I think is a huge plus in that defensive tackle room, because he was one that you never want to, from a freshman, true freshman coming into in a line of scrimmage league like the SEC, especially a D tackle, you wonder just how much they can give you. But being that he's already 6'6", 310 pounds, already has the size to play the position, and obviously you would have liked for him to be in for spring practice just because that would have already given him a head start, and you wonder where he'd be at right now if he'd already had the spring practice reps in. But that's something that Christian Ingram's going to be one to watch, I think, just because of that room. And you think about some of the depth that's already in that room with Moncal Goodwin, Nick Barrett, Troy Pikes is one that I'm really intrigued to see as well. But Christian Ingram's one that's going to be really interesting to watch just because of that size he already brings. And he's already made a little bit of noise so far in preseason camp. And so I think that's a really good thing for that room. The more you have in that room, the better, just because of how much they like to rotate in the room. And you saw that last year, even with TJ Sanders, talking Hemingway, Alex Huntley, all of DeAndre Jules, all those guys. They really like to rotate a lot in that room. And if Christian Ingram can give them a lot, that goes along well with the guys I mentioned, and Devontae Miles, Troy Pikes, and those guys.
All right, there we go. Something, my webcam's acting up. All right, so I want to bring in Lulu Kesin from the Greenville News and the USA Network, formerly of The Ringer, and our resident, along with Mike Uva, Boston Celtics fan who looks like they could be tanking. So I have one question for the both of you. And Lulu, it's certainly great to have you back on. I hope you've had a great summer. We'll get to more of that after this because I want to let Alex go. But I wanted to bring both of you in for this question because I ride around, I'm in my car all day long from 10 a.m. Central until 6. And all I hear about is how deep and how great this quarterback class is. But the only names I ever hear mentioned is Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, and Arch Manning. And I'm just wondering, like Roddy Jones from the ACC network on ESPN 84 on Sirius XM, he said Garrett Nussmeier was the only returning quarterback in the SEC. And I'm like, dude, did you not see LaNorris Sellers run over, through, and around the ACC champion in college football playoff defense? Did you not see him beat number 10 Texas A&M? Did you not see him have 5 touchdown passes against Missouri? Did you not see the hottest quarterback in the country over the second half of the season? Why is the national – I mean, I hear it. Colin Cowherd Show, Dan Patrick, Morning Drive, Rick Neuheisel, those guys, the guys that come on after – all they talk about is this deep quarterback class, but nobody is willing to say LaNorris Sellers' name, and I don't know why. Maybe they didn't look and see that he was the first team preseason all-SEC quarterback. Ladies first, Lulu, welcome in. Your thoughts. I mean, I'm just dumbfounded, and especially now South Carolina's ranked 13th. And if they start 5-0, they're going to be ranked inside the top 8 in the country, which will set them up for a college football playoff run.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised, I guess, that people are either purposely or subconsciously leaving LaNorris's name off of these lists and out of these conversations. I think that there are some who still don't really believe South Carolina is good enough again this year to make sort of the waves that some people believe they will. And I think LaNorris is obviously the face of the program right now. So when people don't believe in maybe Shane's vision or South Carolina's, they by, default sort of just crap on LaNorris, for lack of a better word, or just kind of like choose to ignore his potential. And I also think it's probably just a mix of bad journalism and lazy journalism. I mean, saying that there's only one returning quarterback in the SEC, like that's just factually incorrect and crazy. So I think there's definitely a mix of opinion where people are purposely like still not buying into the Shane Beamer era. I mean, still not believing like there should have been a contract extension and raise and things like that. So I think that LaNorris, just by association and by default being the face of the program and the QB, is always going to get the respect that the program gets, I would say. And I think a lot of people are still having trouble like individually recognizing what he can do because they don't want to believe South Carolina like can be good again.
All right, Alex, what say you?
Yeah, I think it's everything Lulu said. Then I'll throw in that, I think there's the national narrative that he's got a big step to take from a passing standpoint. That's just not the case. Like you look at his stats, I think if you just look at his stats from last year, like he was in the high 60s from a percentage standpoint of pass completion percentage. And so I think a lot of it is just, they think he's just, this year, I think they think teams are going to adjust to him from a running standpoint and not going to let him run, which I think LaNorris probably has other plans for that too. But like, I think it's just a lot of the national narrative is like he's just a runner, which as we all know, is not the case.
Well, I'll say this, okay. The last 8 games, including the bowl game, which everybody thought he had a terrible game, he completed 70% of his passes, okay, 69% over the last 8 games, and a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, essentially 15 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, not to mention the Clemson game where he had over 160 yards passing and rushing, including, the only 2 touchdowns scored by the Gamecocks that day, where he was just unstoppable in the run game. But, Alex, I can't thank you enough. Great stuff. As always, we're going to let you get out of here. But I do want to mention that, and at the end of the show, stay tuned because I will have my say on that. So, Alex, all the best, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Appreciate you having me on. See you next time.
All right, so before we get into our in-depth discussion with Lulu, today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Preseason football is underway. College football is right around the corner, but you can already make season-long, more or less picks for the 2025 NFL season on Prize Picks. Enter your picks before week 1 kicks off. So I checked out Prize Picks yesterday, and I've already made my over-under. I'm going with Jaden Daniels, who was unbelievable last year. I look at Washington's schedule. I've got him going over 3,400 and 0.5 yards passing this season. Washington added Debo Samuel to the roster. I think he's going to be great. Saquon Barkley, more or less 1,475.5 yards rushing. Will Joe Burrow have more or less than 4,174.5 yards passing? Will Josh Allen have more or less than 27.5 touchdown passes this year? And Aaron Rodgers more or less than 23.5 passing touchdowns this season? I would have to go under with Aaron Rodgers. So it's fun. It's easy to play Prize Picks. All you do is pick more or less. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. I won several flex plays last year when I would pick 3 or 4 more or less and one wouldn't hit. I'd cash out early and win with that. Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You can win up to 2,000 times your money with Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts their members first, so withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account. So download the Prize Picks app today and use the code Gamecocks to get $50 in lineups after you make your first $5 play. That's all it takes. You don't even have to win. Make a $5 play and you get $50 added to your account. That's code Gamecocks to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. Run your game all season long. All right, Lulu, great to have you back into the show. How's your summer been? Any big time adventures or vacation destinations? Were you up in Martha's Vineyard this summer vacationing with the rich and famous?
No, I was not. I was on Cape Cod, though, and I was in Massachusetts, which was really, really nice. I just loved being home. It was a lot cooler there, temperature-wise. And I saw a ton of my friends and family and went to a wedding, and now I'm back here ready for football.
Any Jordan Belichick sightings?
No, I think they're fully down here now. I think that they're fully – it was funny, like Peyton Pritchard's wife also went to school with a bunch of my friends and grew up around there. So I was way more likely to see the Pritchards. And we were both – Peyton Pritchard was on Cape Cod the same time I was, but no Belichick sightings.
Peyton Pritchard, the NBA's 6th man of the year last year, and probably going to be a starter for the Celtics. All right, so good stuff there. All right, so Lulu, you are our resident women's basketball analyst, and so number one, a couple weeks ago, Ashlyn Watkins announced that she would step away from the team this year. I don't really know if that just means if she's taking a red shirt or if she's going to take a year away to completely heal, because all the stuff she went through from, the on-campus incident to immediately being charged with felony counts by Barney Fife and Goober and Gomer Pyle, to, the university suspension, going through PTI, and then, coming back, missing all of preseason camp, and then the ACL injury. Your thoughts on Ashlyn Watkins and what it means for South Carolina to again be without their best rebounder and shot blocker, this time going into the season, which was the case last year because nobody knew when she would be back.
Yeah, I think when I talk about this, I want to make sure that I'm not discrediting the player Ashlyn is, because she's a tremendous addition to Staley's team. And as you said, a phenomenal rebounder. And I think at times her presence was absolutely missed. That said, I do think that I don't want to say it's a good thing, but the timing of it, at least South Carolina knows, okay, we're not getting her back. Her ACL tear was bleeding into the season anyways. It was sort of this question mark. And I think that when you have a team like Dawn has now, where sort of fundamental elements are new, obviously she's returning a lot, but bringing in a new traditional center and bringing in a star scorer, you sort of need that chemistry to be there from day one. And I think knowing that at least, okay, it's not going to happen where in November or, even December, January, when Ashlyn maybe would have come back, Dawn would have all of a sudden been like, okay, now I have this additional puzzle piece to fit in. And I think that South Carolina has the tools to be okay without her. And I think that a lot of people were really overreacting and freaking out about it. And I think that Dawn played more people than the average. Dawn had a deep bench, so she had the ability to give more minutes around. Joyce is going to play a lot of time this year, and so is Chloe. So it's not like Dawn needed Watkins more than anything. I think that almost it might be she's going to need her a lot more in, oh God, this seems crazy to say 27, but in the 26-27 year, because she's going to be without Chloe. I think Okot only has one more year. She's going to need a really solid forward presence. Does she need it this year? Yes, but does she need it as badly? No.
Good stuff. So, I also think Adele Tack, she will be better this season. With Okot, I don't really know how the NCAA is going to view her clock. I think what kind of season she has could determine if they seek additional eligibility for her, simply because if she has a really good year, she could be a first-round pick in the WNBA draft. But going, to university in Kenya for 3 years, I don't even know. Hell, I don't think anybody knows how that counts after the Diego Pavia rule. But you mentioned Joyce Edwards, and so she's really the player look, we know Latson is a big-time scorer. Certainly I'm intrigued to see, what that looks like on the floor with Raven Johnson, with Tessa Johnson, with Joyce, Chloe, Medina Okot, Maddie McDaniel, the two elite freshman guards/wings that are a part of the program. I mean, it's going to be another deep team. But Joyce Edwards, some more summer events with Team USA, 2 more gold medals for her. Most recently, leading the 3-on-3 gold medal team in the Tournament of Americas as the leading scorer on that team. Not another player from the Columbia area that happened to be on that team. And then, I don't know if you saw this or heard this, but so yesterday there was a post on one of the message boards. And it's a pretty credible poster that talked about Dawn Staley donating over $1 million to the flood relief fund for here in Texas for the horrific floods, the San Antonio area. I mean, there were kids that were at a camp that the floods just washed them away. I mean, the loss of life, the damage, everything. But in that same post, the poster said that Joyce Edwards had gotten a $30 million NIL deal and had donated $16 million to end homelessness in Camden, to build affordable housing or just housing for homeless in Camden. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can find out. I think that would be another great front page story for you. But I mean, that really wouldn't shock me for Joyce Edwards to do that. I mean, if that actually happened, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's crazy. I have not heard that. I know, granted, I have not been here the entire time that both Dawn and Shane have been here, but I know that both of them are pretty private when they donate money, in the sense of they don't want the attention. They don't want people to be like, oh, good for you. You gave money to blah, blah, blah. They kind of like to, I think, help out in a private way. In terms of the Joyce stuff, it would not surprise me if she was doing something like that. I know that she is, like, her education and life outside of basketball is incredibly important to her. And so work like that, I imagine, is something that she's always wanted to do if given the financial flexibility to. But I have not heard about that. That's crazy. I will definitely look into that. But $30 million is a lot of money. But hey, if she's given $16 million of it away to her hometown, that's definitely something to write about if true.
No doubt. So, being the investigative journalist that you are, I anticipate by the next time we have you back on the show, we'll have an answer on that. So, sticking with Joyce Edwards, I'm so intrigued to see how she has expanded her game from freshman to sophomore year. Like, she was one of the youngest players in that FIBA event with it was 5-on-5. Team USA won the gold in that. She would certainly score a lot of points in several of those games, expanding her range, hitting some three-pointers in that. I mean, to you, who are some of the most intriguing players you want to see, starting with Joyce Edwards, and how you think her game has developed that will be on this roster for the 2025-2026 season?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me with Joyce is her defense. And I don't want to say, I want it to improve, because obviously she's a Division I defender, but I think that that's sort of the next step in her game. And I think that it's sort of seeing, I think with these 3-on-3 and this international basketball and stuff, it's a good way for her to develop her individual skills, knowing that she's playing with other people who, like, for example, in the 3-on-3 tournament, if she's not locking down her man or her zone, depending on how they're playing it, like, she's at fault here. It's a lot more pressure. It's a lot of, like, it's a different environment. And I think in new environments, you tend to grow just a little bit more. And so I'm hoping that all this time away, she's going to bring it productively and be like, okay, my defense can improve because I have practice doing this, that, the other thing under a different coach in a new environment. I think that I'm very curious to see how the freshmen play out. I think it's really hard to, like, judge freshmen just because the leap from high school basketball to especially South Carolina is just huge. And so I think both McKeer and McDowell can do really, really great things. And I think that Dawn is probably going to see them get a fair amount of minutes, especially early on, given the non-conference schedule that we've seen so far. I think that Maddie McDaniel I don't want to say like she has to have a huge year, but I think that she'll be key behind Raven. And I think it's good having a point guard that, like Raven, doesn't just sit there and want to play outside and shoot threes. They're both really good at driving and facilitating. And so I think that having a player like Latson and Tessa Johnson on both sides of those point guards will be really great. I've been seeing some things sort of like I'm just going to be honest. I think that on paper, like Tessa and Latson are going to be a little bit stronger of guards and scorers than like Pow Pow and Bree Hall were, at least last year. And so I'm curious to see when you have more dominant scorers, how as a 5 that starts to play out, because obviously the year before their center was their dominant scorer. And so now I'm curious to see what happens when they have a sort of a shooting guard that wants to be assertive on offense. I think obviously Tessa, I think she's sort of the X factor. I know how she can play, and that's why I think she's going to play a massive role in their success this year. And obviously Chloe just has to keep going up. I think the jump she's had year after year, as long as she isn't taking a step back, then I think South Carolina's forwards are in pretty good shape.
I would agree. I think, having Maddie McDaniel now in her second season, I'm a huge fan of her game. But I think having Latson and Tessa on the floor and their ability to score, whether it's shooting the three, off the dribble, in the mid-range, going to the basket, I just think that's going to open it up for Joyce Edwards, for Chloe Kitts, for Medina Okot, because I don't think – even that 38-0 national championship team, I just don't think you had – I know Tessa and Fulwiley were freshmen then, Pow. She had her best year, but I just don't think you had two players. Now, I think Tessa, it's her time, and she is supremely skilled. She just reminds me of one of those players that always winds up at UConn. I know, thank God she didn't. I think she kind of got lost into all the post emphasis, but now when you have Raven Johnson, it's her last go round. She is a great distributor of the ball. And then you have two wing players at the same time in Tanaya Latson and Tessa Johnson. I just think that really opens it up, for ball screen action, lob action off the screen and roll, the pick and pop for Chloe, for Joyce. I just think it opens up the entire offense, and I'm just so intrigued to see how they run it this year.
Yeah, and to add another layer, now you have Chloe, who is comfortable shooting a three-pointer, which not only creates a layer for defense, but just stretches the offense in a different way. And obviously Dowda coming off the bench can she's working to get stronger, and more comfortable with her back to the basket. But you can also sort of push her outside and force, a smaller forward to play a 6'3" on the perimeter, which just opens up and creates a lot of vulnerability for Okot to go to work inside. I really think Dawn has a lot that she can work with this year.
So I don't know, maybe it was the angle, but there was a team picture, an event this summer, and I'm blanking, but Miriam Dowda, she was on one end, and she looked like she had hit a growth spurt. She looked just as tall as, Dowda, and Medina close to her, but she looked as tall, certainly, as Adele Tack. And I'm interested to see, did she hit a growth spurt, or was it just kind of a weird angle? But that's another option. I thought she really started producing down the stretch and in the NCAA tournament. They were kind of searching for another body after Ashlyn went down. It took her a while, but the game finally slowed down, and I think, this could be a productive year for Miriam Dowda as well.
Yeah, I definitely was really harsh in my analysis of her in the beginning, but But I think like it was a really difficult situation to walk into. I mean, I can't really even wrap my head around coming into a program that not only do you have the success and the intelligence of Dawn Staley, but you're coming into a team that hasn't lost a game in years. And so, or at least a regular season game at that point. And so it's sort of this dynamic of like, they don't need me, but they wanted me. I imagine is a really difficult kind of mindset to have, but she seems just so happy. I think that's the coolest thing to see. Like her social media presence, as she's posted a lot about like being unhappy and then transferring and finding your home and finding your friends. And I just think like knock on wood, and for her sake, I'm hoping, I really do think there's going to be a huge jump, and at least like her confidence goes a long way in basketball. And I think that you saw like that Oklahoma SEC tournament game when she locked Reagan Beers down. Like I keep going back to that in my writing, but I was like, that's what she can do. Now it's just, okay, can you do it a couple games in a row rather than, once in a blue moon? And I think she can.
I mean, I think we forget that her last year at Arkansas, she had like 10 block shots in an SEC game, and she actually led the SEC in block shots.
Yeah,
that year at Arkansas with Camila Cardoso at South Carolina. Certainly Cardoso missed some games to be with Team Brazil in an international competition. I think, Camila led the SEC, in average blocks per game, but the total blocks during the season, Marion Dowda led the SEC, and you're right. That was kind of eye-opening because the year before in the NCAA tournament against Oregon State, Reagan Beers presented problems for South Carolina. All right, so before we let you go, the SEC announced the dates for all the SEC matchups. And for me, there's like three, maybe I guess four. Kentucky is the last game of the season at Lexington. I think I would consider that a marquee game, but the first three marquee games, Texas, for some reason, they're only playing once this year, and they're only playing LSU once this year. I think that is a fail on the part of the SEC scheduling. South Carolina should be playing Texas or LSU twice every year because those are the three Final Four contending teams in the league. The Texas game's on a Thursday, January the 15th. I thought for sure that would be a Sunday or a Monday night national TV game. I really didn't understand that. But then Tennessee, you do get on a Sunday afternoon, February the 8th. And then, Lulu, I can never remember an SEC women's basketball game being on a Saturday. But on Saturday, February the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, South Carolina will play at LSU, and I don't think there'll be a whole lot of love in the air for that game. And so, obviously, that's going to be a marquee game while the men are playing. I have to think ABC is probably going to carry that game. Your thoughts on those, and then I think it's March the 1st on a Sunday, Kentucky. That'll be senior day at Kentucky. Kenny Brooks doing a remarkable job at Kentucky. But your thoughts on the schedule, and to me, those four games kind of really stick out as the marquee games for South Carolina this season.
Yeah, I knew ahead of time that South Carolina and LSU were going to be playing on a day that South Carolina's never played an SEC game on. So I was trying to figure out ahead of time, and I came to the conclusion right before the schedule was released that it was a Saturday. have to imagine it's, like you said, like ABC national. I think ESPN is probably going to try to do a lot on it. I don't know how much they're going to get. I don't know how much like LSU and Malaysia's sort of crew is going to be want to like talk about transferring. I don't see a world in which Dawn is like, let's sit down and talk about Full Wiley leaving, but we'll see. We'll see what we get out of it. But yeah, like you said, obviously the home and home series being Alabama this year isn't ultra exciting, isn't the same as having Texas, but I think a Texas home game will be good. It's funny, like so much, and obviously I'm biased because this is where I cover, but like home games like the fans, everything is just so loud and electric in Colonial Life Arena, and some of the home games this year aren't the same level. Like last year there was LSU, Texas, and Oklahoma and Kentucky all at home. And so now you have to kind of flip the switch and go on the road for all of those. It'll be interesting to see how those, I guess, all play out. But Tennessee coming here, I think will be really exciting just because Tennessee is always sort of a fun program to watch, especially with their hockey shifts and sort of the dynamic now. And now they have the transfer from LSU, they do have one from LSU, but also from UCLA, Barker, I think. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that the Valentine's Day game, it's a tough weekend for me because it's a lot of people in my life. It's their birthday weekend. So not only am I missing Valentine's Day, but also a couple birthdays not being home, but it happens. But yeah, I'm very excited to see I just want basketball season to be here. I'm so excited.
So I can only imagine the level of hideousness Kim Mulkey's outfit for a Valentine's Day game will be. I mean, I could see ABC having women's game day at LSU for that game, right? Because it is going to be on a special day. I mean, I know like UConn's conference, they play on Saturday. I've seen them on Fox on Saturday. But, you know, the SEC, to my knowledge, this will be the first nationally televised Saturday game. Certainly the first one for South Carolina. But, I mean, just how crazy do you think that outfit is going to be for Mulkey? We know she loves the ridiculousness of, I mean, even the fans, they buy into it. Like they dress up like Kim Mulkey. I can't even begin to imagine that. So, I mean, that will be, I don't know if you saw that game 2 years ago. LSU led the entire game, and Breezy Hall hit the big corner three to give Carolina the lead, and Angel Reese committed a ridiculous foul and fouled out in South Carolina. I think outscored LSU like 11-2 or 3 at one point and ended up winning that game in Baton Rouge. Then this past year, they came to Columbia. Texas at Columbia, I'm just setting the line. The Gamecocks are 16.5-point favorites because I think in Columbia and in the SEC tournament in Greenville, South Carolina won by 17 or more. And I think in the NCAA tournament as well in the Final Four, it was not good for Vic Schaefer and the Longhorns there. So 2 more women's basketball thoughts. Asia Wilson inducted, will be a part of this year's South Carolina Letterman's Hall of Fame. And then, you know, all we hear about is Caitlin Clark. Like, she is the only player in women's professional sports. It's nauseating. I'm not denying her talent. But she gets credit for everything, and certainly she deserves a lot of credit because she's put a lot of eyeballs and a lot of TVs on the women's game, both collegiately and the WNBA. She has not been healthy this year, and she has not shot the ball this year. And she's been out, and Indiana, at least going into yesterday's play, was in the midst of a 5-game win streak, and Aaliyah Boston is the WNBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week, averaging 16.7 points and 11.7 rebounds per game. And it's like it's kind of like LaNorris Sellers. Nobody even admits that she's a professional player, and she was the number 1 pick, the Rookie of the Year, and been an All-Star every year that she's been in the WNBA.
Yeah, it is definitely exhausting how often Caitlin's name just takes up every single conversation in the W, but so many Gamecock alums are just kind of having a really, really, really great year. Alicia Gray obviously played 1 season, but still that counts and is phenomenal. And even Pow Pow has had really good pockets of time. Sanaya had a good run sort of in between right before Cameron Brink came back. And I do think that she'll still continue to get some good minutes here and there. And then obviously Asia's battled a little bit of injuries, but overall, even though the Aces are sort of really struggling, she seems to not. So it's been fun. It's a good fix while I wait for college basketball to start.
And Camila Cardoso, she is on a run of double-doubles.
Absolutely.
Even though Chicago's not a great team, there's a lot of people, I think, on X that are begging for the Aces to trade for Camila and have the Twin Towers with her and Asia on the same team. I'd love to see that. I don't know how realistic it is, but seems to be a lot of chatter about that.
That would be great. I think having somebody to offset Asia and help her and make her feel like she doesn't have to do everything alone would also be cool.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like Chelsea Gray is kind of like aged in a hurry. She, that decline was quick, kind of like Marcus Smart, but she was a lot better than Marcus Smart comparatively to their leagues. So Lulu, great stuff. I know we didn't talk a lot of football, but
that's okay.
I certainly think the LaNorris Sellers issue is just perplexing and maybe motivating. Maybe Shane Beamer will use that. I think the 3 things, and this will be the last thing as we wrap up with you, that matter in the age of the transfer portal is obviously recruiting, okay, but culture. Culture is the biggest factor now, I think, in college football. Is the culture within your program, the leadership and the buy-in, because of all the new players that are coming in every single year. And a lot of freshmen are more developed, so they're playing. Keeping them in the program, like Dylan Stewart, like LaNorris Sellers, who turned down $4 million a year to go to allegedly Clemson, even though they've got Cade Klubnik. At least that's what LaNorris's dad said. Mm-hmm. And then player development, which I think South Carolina is really good at player development because they have a great staff. And I think that's why, even though South Carolina's got to replace a lot, there's a lot of big-time athletes in this program, and it seems like everybody's bought into the culture.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think that the future of the program is going in the right direction for sure.
All right. Well, great stuff. As always, great to have you back in, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road and maybe you could follow up on that Joyce Edwards, the great philanthropist now, allegedly at the University of South Carolina. Be well, and appreciate all your great coverage. Great to hear your voice in the press conferences, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Sure thing. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me as always.
All right. That was Lulu Kesin, Alex Jones. Great stuff. Craig, I am thriving and rolling, my man. Life is good. Even though it's hot, I just leave my car running with the AC, so I'm not getting hot. So I know it's going to be hot and humid in Columbia. That joint was built above the 7th level of hell. It is the hottest, most humid place on the planet. So thanks to everybody for tuning in live, everybody that will watch or listen to this on the Bleed Podcast Network, Apple, and Spotify. If you haven't subscribe to the YouTube page, subscribe, give us a good review. Same thing on Apple and Spotify. Subscribe, rate us 5 stars. It gets us into the algorithm. And so I'll be back next week. We'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily on Patreon. That's for patrons only. Every day, Monday through Friday. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we have the Garnet and Black Town Hall on Tuesday night. That was over about 90 minutes last night, recorded. That's the longest in the history of the show, in 1,820 episodes with the Garnet and Black Town Hall. And then beginning with week 0, we'll start the morning after, which will be on Sundays, except for South Carolina's opener, because that's a Sunday afternoon game, and I'm still hoping to be in Atlanta, so that one may be on a Monday morning, the morning after podcast, which is, I think, the most popular podcast during the football season. So special thanks to Alex Jones and Lulu Kesin. This is Keith Alsep saying thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next week, I'll be back. Same bat time, same bat channel. God bless. Go Gamecocks and be well, everybody. I'm out of here.